lesser zoning categories, neighborhood professional, neighborhood commercial, limited commercial, offers us what we have on our special exception currently. We can't have nighttime hours. Our square footage is limited to accessory buildings of 350 square feet. Limited commercial allows you 5,000 square feet. Neighborhood professional offers 2,500 square feet. The house, we have the house and the combined 3 buildings that we've restored from a wreck total somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,500 square feet of conditioned space.
How much of that space is actually used for your,
My veterinary clinic,
yes,
1,200.
okay?
1,200
So
out of the 3,000.
1,200 square feet is
Out of the 8,500?
out of the 8,500. Now, our reason for asking for community commercial is not to put a convenience store or a gas station there. We don't want that. We live on Park Avenue as well, and we live there. And we have thoughts that if a veterinarian wants to buy my practice, if we want to sell it to a veterinarian, if they can't do night hours, which buildings would you want to tear down? Which one of those lovely buildings that I built? To conform with the neighborhood professional or limited commercial. To be able to utilize all those buildings, I need community commercial. Now, that's the veterinary side of it. How about a bed and breakfast? Wouldn't you like to live in a place or rather than a roach coach if your relatives come in to visit you? That would be a suitable place for a bed and breakfast. Professional offices, there's nothing in the code that allows that for that square footage, those hours of operation, and 2 accessory use buildings, a garage and a garage. So we're
Okay.
caught. We're caught in the zoning laws. We're not trying to get over on anyone.
You've
And
just
I-
outgrown your space.
We haven't outgrown our space for us.
Well, it sounds like it if you want to increase your hours and your building size is
I didn't say
extended
we
over.
wanted to increase our hours. My hours are all night. I can take care of animals any time of the night or day.
So if you don't need to increase your hours and you're already covered under a residential exception, then why are you asking for a commercial?
Because if I want to sell my practice to someone to make it an ongoing, this is the oldest veterinary practice in the town of Mount Airy.
Hold on.
Okay, all right, very good.
It's the oldest veterinary practice in Mount Airy.
So the only other question I'm going to have.
It leaves us more options so that those buildings don't get torn down
Understand,
to
so you
put a
can make it more
5,000 square
sellable.
foot.
So
box.
Bring
the
this
last
to a close.
question I'm going to ask is that it's been repeated multiple times that there's 3 corners with commercial businesses on it. Can you tell me what those corners are and what those commercial businesses are?
I will state to you, they're commercial uses. We're a commercial use. The post office is a commercial. Are you
You're
going
not-
to say they're not a
No.
commercial use?
You're not commercial.
So they're not labeled,
You're
No.
residential exception.
You're residential.
but I'm
So
not.
what else is a
So
commercial
it's
use on 3
semantical
corners?
then, you're
A
saying.
post
No,
office is not
that's how it's
commercial.
zoned. So I'm asking you
No, I understand that's how
specifically
it's
for the
zoned.
wording. How is it zoned? Because people throw around commercial and they're using it incorrectly. So I'd like to know which 3 corners are commercial.
I would contend that we are a commercial use. I would contend that the post office is a commercial use. I would contend that the Twin Arts Shopping Center is a commercial use.
That one
And
I'll
I
give
would-
you.
And I would contend that the Carnival Grounds is a commercial use.
Okay.
Now, whether you want to, however you want to mix
Okay.
up the
That's-
wording,
that's
I'm
fine.
not going
Alright,
to
point
disagree
made.
with you on the
That's it.
verbiage
No,
of
I
the
just
law.
wanted to make sure I was clear on what people are
You're-
calling commercial versus how it's
Okay,
zoned.
Yes.
good clarification. Roxanne, one last comment.
On
And
the
then we're gonna
special
have a motion.
exception, if the property was a veterinarian business and another veterinarian was to come in and purchase the property, correct me if I'm wrong, that special exception would remain.
Within 1 year.
Right. Heard that there were some potential restrictions on this special, I'd like to see.
Not on
I'm
a
waiting.
special exception.
There was,
Isn't that what we were just
No.
talking
No.
about?
That's why it was disgusting.
she said if it was sold, then they would have to come back through. But I can't find the wording, Heather, and I know I think it's in there.
Vested rights.
Vested, yeah.
And
So, if,
I've received 2 different attorney opinions, not
Okay.
by Mr. McCarron on that.
okay, but what I'm saying is if a veterinarian came in there and did a turnkey and immediately started working as a veterinarian business, that special exception wouldn't lapse, it would just continue.
Right, within that 1-year time period, correct?
Unless there's some special restrictions
Right,
on
'cause
this
that falls
particular.
under
Okay,
You're thinking of a non-conforming use
Let's
that
get to the heart.
expires.
Yeah.
Okay.
He would
That's
continue, that would continue, he could
Gotcha.
continue that use.
Thank you.
All right?
Can I make one last comment? I'll be brief.
Yes, you will.
This is about preserving a historic property in Mount Airy as well. And the more latitude, I'm sorry, the more latitude you grant someone, you'll save yourself from getting a 5,000 square foot box sitting there. I mean, if you give us more latitude to work what we have.
So I'm just going to end that part of the discussion with A, there's a historical ordinance that's coming up, that's a different discussion, but B, to say that a big box is going on the property when it's already zoned residential exception, there's no big box that's going to go on that property unless we zone it otherwise.
No doubt, no doubt, but I'm talking about the future with a developer with more wherewithal than we have.
There's
Okay.
nothing going on there unless we rezone it differently.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Okay,
Do we have
let's,
that- Do we have that paperwork? I'm
Yeah,
still
I-
waiting for it.
Barney's.
Where did Barney go with that?
do we need that paperwork?
I would like to
I
see,
need it.
I would like to see what the Board of Appeals
I
said
absolutely
when they actually changed it.
Yes, me too.
brief break?
Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Here's Barney.
Here comes Barney.
He made it.
Shall we give ourselves?
Please,
Do we give ourselves like
break
5
now, or-
minutes to read it over?
yes.
Let's go ahead and take the break.
I would.
Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a 5-minute break. And while you're taking a break, we're gonna look at this paperwork. We're gonna reconvene at 9:15 on the button.
Please. You still on?
Okay, we're going to reconvene. If I could have your attention, we're going to reconvene. As expected, the 5 minutes stretched out to almost 10. This has been a very valuable discussion. The chair would entertain a motion. What is your pleasure?
I will make the motion to follow what the existing discussion was of denying this for commercial at this time. That's what the motion is, just to deny for commercial.
Is there a second? Motion has been made by Councilman Strong and seconded by Leslie Dickinson.
Can I make a
to
clarification to the motion?
Deny,
Community commercial?
Community commercial, sorry.
Thank you.
to deny the request
CC.
to change the current zoning to community commercial. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, like sign. And it passes unanimously with one abstention. Okay. As we stipulated before, this is simply a part of a process. It continues. All right, what shall we take up next?
You want to do 1010, or do you want to say that
Let's
the last
see.
302 and back to?
What's your pleasure? What do you want to do next?
Do the carnival grounds, since we're at the
You
intersection.
want me to do?
Do the one across the street?
Since we're in proximity to the location, let's do the carnival grounds.
I think the seniors are waiting for that one too.
If there are any seniors who wanted to stay and make comment or contribute to the discussion on the carnival grounds, we're going to do that next. Otherwise, thank you for coming this evening. And we tried our best to make it as early in the evening as possible, but that's just the way P&Z meetings go. Well, hey, I wouldn't mind going myself, you know. I need my strength.
All right, let's go.
Let's go. All right, Heather?
Okay, the Firemen's Carnival Grounds located at 1008 Twin Arch Road is bordered by Twin Arch Road and Route 27. It is 37 acres, and it's currently zoned R2, low-density residential. And as everyone is aware, the fire company has submitted a request for the consideration to zone this to CC, which is our most intense commercial zoning. The property is vacant for any residential use. As we know, we have our carnivals, and it's our fairground, and our ball fields. So is there a fireman?
Does anybody want to talk to it?
Do we have a representative from the volunteer fire company here who wishes to
You
speak?
want to stand up for it?
We're good. Just out of curiosity, Chief, how long has this request been, provided to the town?
President.
Or president, excuse me, not the chief, the president. My bad.
That's okay. Tom Walters, President of Mount Airy Volunteer Fire Company. This request was initiated in January of 2009, so it's been 5 years that we've been working on this. So, and our position statement hasn't changed, and we do have on record with the town. We have made in writing our requests through our land use attorney, as well as position statement in February of this year to planning and zoning and to the to your body. So
You might also touch on the fact that you recently clarified that there hadn't been backroom discussions with regard to
and we asked the
potential
council to
annexation.
reaffirm that.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely, that there is no secret negotiations, and there never have been with the Mount Airy, in respect to the Mount Airy Volunteer Fire Company. We've been serving the community since 1926. We're going to continue to do that.
So quick question, since you're up there, and this has been ongoing, like you said, for 5 years. What is the urgency in going commercial
Well, I don't think
versus-
it's urgent. It's been 5 years.
No, I'm just asking, why go residential to commercial now when it's been used traditionally 4 or 5 years or more, actually since I've lived here, as a carnival ground.
And it's continued to gain in value, even while it was
I'm just trying to
utilized in those
understand,
ways.
for the residents' purposes, of why it should be
First of all,
considered.
it's never going to be residential. You're never going to build houses there, number one. So we feel that the classification of that property is inappropriate. It's not residential. Number two, verbally, and to this body, we made a statement saying that we are not currently trying to sell the carnival grounds. And there's a lot of emotion in this in the town, and we do have a land use attorney to try and take emotion out of it. This has nothing to do with the Maya and the ball fields. This simply is an effort on our part that should in the future, for some reason, to continue to provide fire service to this town, that from an economic standpoint, that we have to do something with that property, we have the ability to do that. But our responsibility, we are in the fire service business. We're a nonprofit organization. We are here to provide a service to this town. And as a volunteer, I'm a volunteer president. And I have other members of the fire company here. We've been doing that since 1926. It's getting more and more difficult as time goes on to continue to do that and provide the level of support that this organization provides this community. We continue to spend more and more dollars with career and part-time personnel. I don't know if the town realizes that our building is paid for on North Main Street. Carnival grounds are paid for. But all of our capital equipment, we pay for that through fundraising. It is not provided by the county, and thank God this town supports us in the way it does. From the mayor, the town council, the community, we appreciate every single dollar that we get from the town and from the community, but it is becoming more and more difficult to provide the service that this town expects. When you dial 911, you want an ambulance, fire truck, or rescue squad to show up. And that's what we've done. It's what we do. We've been doing it since 1926. We're going to keep doing that.
So just to be clear, you're saying at some point in the future, not today?
Not today,
There could be a
not
necessity where
tomorrow.
the fire department isn't funded
If
well
for
enough
some-
that they need to sell this property.
If some particular reason, that's correct.
Okay, so, all right, thank you.
And I did make a statement, and we made a statement to the town council as well as this body, that no matter what, our responsibility is for fire protection of this town. And regardless of the zoning of the property, whatever we have to do to continue to maintain that operation, we'll do. We'll do whatever we have to do. Because that's our responsibility. That's why we get up in the middle of the night.
And that's why the town likewise supports the fire
That's
department.
correct.
and
That's
all
why
the
we get up
individuals
all night
doing it.
long.
So,
So,
thank you.
I mean, we're good.
Okay.
So it's all on record.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Stevens. I'm a retired teacher from Mount Airy Elementary School. I substitute there now, and I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of our children. And before I do that, I want to say God bless the fire department. We love you and we need you, and you guys do a wonderful job. As I have taught my fifth graders, and I think I've taught many of your children that are in the room tonight, government is for the people, and it starts with the people. You all get your power from the people. A group of people we forget about quite often spoke tonight. It's our elderly people and the young people. We need to learn from history. Mount Airy got its name because we're a railroad town. The engineers would come through here and they noticed the breeze and the fresh air, and they said, let's name this place Mount Airy. They used to send children from the city of Baltimore who had TB to Mount Airy to camps to get healthy with their lungs. I'm speaking for not only your children, but your children's children. We need to preserve Mount Airy. I lived in Columbia, Maryland, from 1982 to 2001, and it started residential. And little by little, we let the commercial, community commercial come in. It came to the point where, if you've been to Columbia, it's noisy, it's polluted, it's crime-ridden, the traffic is horrible. It got to the point you could not leave your house after 5 o'clock to get anywhere. It was just gridlock. We moved to Mount Airy 12 years ago, and it's like living in Mayberry, isn't it? When you're sitting on those ball fields and you're rooting for the Mount Airy Bulldogs, you feel like you're in a Norman Rockwell painting. When the carnival comes to town, the kids are so excited, they can't wait as families to, I mean, it's who we are. That property is the heart and soul of Mount Airy. And what I've heard tonight from the senior citizens, I'm so proud of you for speaking up, but also we need to remember not just our children, and with all due respect, what the fire department is saying, they don't want to do it now, but if we put it in there, they could do it later. And we could just say goodbye to Mount Airy. It'll just be like, well, we remember when it was a nice place to live, and where are we all going to move next? So thank you so much, and just please remember the children and the ball fields, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your contributions as a teacher in our schools.
Mine too.
My name is Sean Happel. I live at 1918 Reading Court in the townhouses behind the Twin Arts Shopping Center. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my wife and I are commuters. We live in Mount Airy. We moved here even though it meant a 3-hour round-trip commute for us. It takes us 45 minutes to make it to the metro, 45 minutes from there to our respective jobs, and the same hour and a half back home. We moved here because we found something we haven't found in most of Maryland. We found a community where kids played outside, even after the sun went down, where neighbors talked with each other and knew each other, where the chili cook-off, where the Christmas parade and the town fair actually meant something. They were the big events where when I walked into a shopping center afterwards, the sales clerk was upset because she had missed it. We want that for our kids. And so Mount Airy and that commute is worth it. I used to live in Leesburg. When I moved there, it was a crossroads. Now, I was pretty young when that happened. Mount Airy reminds me a lot of the way Leesburg used to be. For several years in a row, they were the third fastest or higher fastest growing county in the United States. By the time my sister was in high school, she couldn't ride her bicycle outside because the MS-13 gang was in the area. I don't know if you remember reading about the machete attacks. Leesburg is a special case. I understand that. But it did happen. We lived through that. We live in the townhouses behind the Twin Arts Shopping Center. Right now, our community is residential. We have residential behind us, we have farms on 2 sides of us, and we have a small industrial center with the Twin Arts Shopping Center and the newly developed industrial circle outside of it. That circle and that shopping center are limited from expanding because of the fairground on the one side and because of the farm on the other side. I could be mistaken, but I remember seeing a letter mailed to our house talking about a motion to turn the land behind the fairground into a shopping center. That, the fairground proposal, and the Beck proposal, and I realize that the Beck proposal isn't up for discussion just yet, but I'm combining it all into one to save time. If you want, I'll come up here and give the same speech again.
That's fine.
There you go, that's fine.
Those 3 together would take the small Twin Arts Shopping Center and in one step, turn it into a swath of business areas stretching from Watkins Park all the way up to Route 70. Looking at the map, that I could be wrong. You know, it's hard to tell from looking at the map here, but just looking at it, it looks to me like it would be the single largest business area within Mount Airy. And the townhouses would be cut off. We would be very uncomfortable raising our kids there. One last thing, somebody mentioned the survey at the last presentation about an hour ago. The last thing that I heard said on that was attract businesses and keep that rural feel. And I remember it being rated at 96 or 98%, I can't remember which, but it was pretty high.
90 plus.
90 plus. I also want to keep that rural feel. I want to, well, I can live in the suburbs a lot closer to our jobs. Suburbs are all around us, but Mount Airy is unique. It's the only place in Maryland that we found it with that feel, and I'm asking you guys, please, defend that feel for us.
Can we clap, please?
I'm Dave Pyatt from 75 Park Avenue. I'd like to just give my kudos to the fire company. I served on the council for a long time. I've worked with most of those people. I'm active in the Lions Club, all those things. Wonderful bunch of folks. The concern I have, I think, has been stated by several others. We're in a change in how we do the master plans from 10 years ago. I think in 2013, the master plan was kind of a little looser. Now we have municipal growth elements, water resource requirements. There are some state requirements that have to be met. But the concern I have is once we get the master plan approved and on the books, we can always go back and rezone things. I don't think we have to go through a master plan process. Once we get this thing as a done deal, then if the fire company says, oh my God, you know, we've been doing this thing since 1926, whatever it is, we can't do it, we have to make some changes, I think that's the appropriate time to go through and do a rezoning. I don't think sort of an open-ended, ephemeral, if that's the word, oh, we really should think ahead, it's not really the type of thing that should be in this master plan. I think the master plan is still, it's somewhat behind schedule. Should be what's here now that we want to do. And I just think that once we get this approved, the door will always be open for, you know, anybody, but especially, you know, the fire company to come in and say, now's the time.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else besides Roxanne? Okay.
My name is Roxanne Hemphill. I live at 605 Park Avenue. I was born in 1954. I now live in the house that I grew up in, and I've been there, I guess, shy of about 8 years. I came back from a stint in Salisbury, Maryland, and my father became very ill and moved in to help my mother with my father. I know zoning is very emotional, and this time I apologize, it's going to get very emotional. Over 17 times since before his death, more than 17 times I had to call the ambulance, 911. The first thing that came, even before the ambulance got there, was somebody in that volunteer truck. They immediately started to work on my father. And not soon after, then the ambulance would come and whatever else needed to come. I talked to the firemen, and they knew that he was in advanced life support. He had a pacemaker, he had a defibrillator. He had had an aortic valve bypass. And every one of them knew the situation with my father. As soon as they came through the door, they would say, how is he and where is he? Without any regard to anybody else. And there we would take him. And they would take him up to Frederick or wherever he needed to go. I can't say enough about the fire department. They saved my father's life a couple times. I want them to be able to have the ability, if they come into some financial problem. And yes, we have been financially supporting the volunteers for a very long time. I grew up with most of them. Most of them saw me grow up as a child. But I want them to be able to have that ability if something were to happen, that they needed to do something and to get more financial support than what we can give them. And I think that this is something that should be done for them.
Hi, I'm Melissa Garner from 1203 Conestoga Court. I really had no intentions of speaking, but I literally just moved here last weekend.
Oh, wow. You may be the newest resident.
We purchased our property in January, though. Literally a week after we purchased the property, we got a letter in the mail about the Pank property.
Okay.
Great potential box going right behind our house. Now, this week, reading the messenger, I find out fairgrounds, potential box on the other side of my property. It's upsetting. because my husband and I, we both come from small towns in the South Carolina, he's North Carolina. I am actually a former volunteer firefighter. My husband is a former volunteer firefighter. He is also career in Montgomery County. So I totally understand the fire department side of things. I have spent many, many hours helping with fundraising and everything. I understand the cost of it. But it's really upsetting to hear this stuff now. And we are actually just talking that, you know, I have a 1-year-old daughter. And one of the biggest things we base everything off of is it's a community.
All right.
It's a community that we can tell people gather on a regular basis. You can walk into a store and you know who's there. And it seems as though this fairgrounds is a very central part of that, and it feeds that. And last weekend, we heard all the music from the Celtic Festival. I mean, clear as day. I'll take that and the regular traffic that comes to the fairgrounds for all the festivities any day over loading and unloading trucks in my backyard just so some big-time moneymaker can keep on making his money. I'll take all the music, all the loud noise, all the cheering, all of the kids screaming, having a good time, any day over that, because we came here for a reason. We came here because we appreciated that feeling. And honestly, maybe we didn't do our homework before we came, but if I would have known that there is any sort of significant potential for boxes to be put in those places, I would not have moved here.
I read that same article in the Messenger.
Mhm.
I believe the writer there,
It was an editorial, yeah, I know.
it was, I think it's a mistake, because
Okay.
I think the person was referring to that Payne property. As far as I know, the fire company has no intention of big boxing.
Well, they may not have.
I think the person was referring to the Payne, not to the company.
Okay, well, they specifically mentioned the carnival grounds, and so, but the thing is that, correct me if I'm wrong, once you do this community commercial, it's open for business. That's right. Right.
For any
There's-
property
Right,
theoretically,
so,
yes.
you know, great, you can go from a little mom and pop shop. No, yes, I understand that. But it could go from a mom and pop shop, which would be great, you know, learning about this survey thing that everybody's talking about. Awesome. Apparently 90-something% of everybody said small business, bring people. Great, I'm all for that too. I'm not Target, Lowe's, Home Depot. I'll drive to Germantown. I'll drive to Frederick. There's a reason why I came here from just south of Baltimore. And, you know, I'm 30 years old. This is my home. I'm making this my home. And it's really upsetting if y'all even consider allowing something like this, because,
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't have moved here.
All right. Anyone else?
Thank
Any
you.
other comments? Quickly, please.
Ashley Rocco. I just wanted to reiterate that I disagree with the rezoning, and I think if this was rezoned, a Lowe's, Home Depot, something will go in here, and it will become Columbia as fast as you know it, including all of the other large properties. I just want to reiterate that I disagree with the rezoning, and that it will affect the culture
Okay.
of Mount Airy.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Ken Phoebus, Summer Ridge. I strongly support the recommendation of the fire company. They got a long-range plan just like you're doing now, and I think they've got to look at the long-range plan. This is one of them. And down the road, you know, what's going to happen? But they're looking down the road, what can happen? I think this is what they're looking at down the road, maybe 20, 30 years down the road. They're not looking at tomorrow. They're looking 30 years down the road. They've got to do something. And you might get a change in the zoning then, you might not. But I think it should be changed. I think you should support the fire company.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
And with that, I'd like to call for a motion.
Okay. The chair,
One, real quick.
quickly.
Okay. First, I'd like to say, my name is Mike Curry, I'm from Conestoga Heights. I appreciate all the landowners, their right to try to develop their land as they wish. I would. What we're here to talk about and get opinions on is what, people in Mount Airy want. And everybody's got this, I think, correct? This is the Beck property, if I'm not mistaken. Then we have Twin Arch. We have the Carnival Grounds. We have the Plank lot, which is basically straight from the Carnival Grounds down to 70. We have this chunk of land, which isn't circled, but I'm pretty sure that's already CC.
That you're correct.
Okay, so, we've got everything from, what road is that there? Watersville?
Center Street.
From Watersville down, CC. And again, I defend everybody's right to try to develop their land the way they want, but Mount Airy, we want that small town feel. If all of these lots get developed, it's gonna be the golden mile down in Frederick. I mean, and we've already had a lot of people speak to traffic issues that already exist. Again, we thank the fire company. We thank everybody for their right to do what they want to do, but we have the right to sit up here and say, this isn't for Mount Airy, because this could very easily start looking like the golden mile.
All right, we appreciate that comment.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Yes, sir. Mayor?
I just want to applaud all the residents that are speaking today. Back when we did the master plan in 2003, we had one resident come forward. Tonight, it's loaded with residents, so I applaud you in the back. It's great to hear people talking. So thank you all very much.
All righty. Chair is ready for a motion. Who wants to make it?
I'll make a motion to deny community commercial for the Carnival Grounds at this time.
Is there a second to that motion?
I will second.
Motion has been made by Leslie and seconded by Councilman Strong to deny the request to change the zoning on the Mount Airy Carnival Grounds, currently zoned R2, to change it to community commercial. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, like sign? Aye. Okay. And the vote is 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1 against? 4 to 1? 1, 2, 3, 4? 5 to 1.
5 to 1.
5 to 1. That's not necessarily for all time, that's just simply right now. All right. Thank you again for all the residents who came and spoke.
If anybody else wants to
Pro
speak,
or
the rest of
con?
them, because we have a couple more.
Pro or con? We have 2 more. We're making progress here.
1, 2, 3.
We're going to do it.
We got 3, right?
Just like the master plan, we're going to finish this.
We got back 3 and 2.
Okay, what's your pleasure, members? Do you want to do Beck, or do you want to do,
We got back 3 and 2 and 10, 10.
we've got 10-10. Do you want to do Beck first, or do you want to do 10-10?
Why don't you do back, because it's right down the street.
We actually have.
Since we're in the area, let's do Beck.
Thank you. Oh,
Let's do
go
Beck.
Okay. Whoop. Okay, the Beck property in question for rezoning is located on the east side of Route 27. The current zoning is R70, which is our highest residential classification, and the requested zoning is CC Community Commercial. This property has, or contains, close to 37 acres and would yield well over 240 residential units, give or take. Mr. Ron Beck is here, one of the applicants for the rezoning, and I don't know if he wants to say a few words.
Mr. Beck? Would you like
wanna
to
say anything?
make any comments, or? Okay. Then, are there any residents here? We've heard some comments relative to this property and this request. Is there anyone who wants to add to that? Or want to share a specific opinion relative to this parcel?
Hear from you.
Okay, yeah.
The only thing I would add is there is a trail that runs to the water processing plant. It's a small road. And so one particular concern that I have is if
eventually gonna be rails to trails, actually. It'll be a formal trail.
Just to the north of it, adjacent to it, once we get across 27.
Right.
Mr. Beck, I will say this from a personal perspective, I think that is one of the most beautiful pieces of property in the entire community, even with the water tower in the middle of it.
So no residents or anything, did Mr. Beck want to say anything?
Mr. Beck, go ahead and step to the podium if you would, and share with folks the motivation behind your request for a rezoning.
My name is Ron Beck. I'm a former, former resident of Mount Airy. I grew up in the town, graduated from Mount Airy High School, went to Virginia Tech. I'm currently a professional engineer. I work with Bechtel Corporation, and I live down on Route 75. I'm one of the 4 surviving kids that own the property. Basically, I guess roughly 5 or 6 years ago, the property that's currently zoned CC was a written request to the Planning Commission to do so, and that was approved in the last master plan. Several years ago, we were in discussion with the town when we had some developers working on different proposals, and we were in a discussion on this master plan update, and we have no specific written request in terms of this particular plan to rezone, potentially rezone from R7 to CC.
Mr. Beck, when did you first approach the town and ask for rezoning consideration?
It was a verbal discussion with the town approximately 3 years ago, and the reason the discussion...
Was that the first time that you had asked for reconsideration or rezoning on this particular property?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And, the basic reason, and, I'm not sure how they stand today, but, we know there's issues with water, there's been issues with the schools, there's been issues with, the sewer capacity of the sewer plant. As was mentioned earlier, the property as it's currently zoned, theoretically has potential for over 250 units. If you all look at the sheet of paper that shows the different zoning requests tonight, down at the bottom, there's some information regarding water use. If you zoned this property or left it as residential, the water use is anywhere from 2 to 5 times as much in a residential zoning as it potentially would be in a community commercial zoning. Recently, I was made aware of some work that the town is doing in terms of a new zoning classification called MXD. And so I was able to obtain a copy of that, and I went through on my own, and I did a comparison of the permitted uses between CC and between the MXD, and then I looked at R7. And if you look at the zoning and the adjoining properties, we have industrial to the east, we have Mr. Nell to the north, we have Watkins Park on the other side by the CC, separated by the old railroad right away. Where the R7 is, we have the shopping center to the south, so I can appreciate the concerns about that being, Golden Mile, and, that's not really the intent. What we're trying to do is figure out a way to work with the town to come up with a zoning that will allow us, should we decide to develop, to be more compatible with the kind of vision that the town has, because, we've been in conversations with the town probably almost 10 years now, and, different proposals, none of which have really met the vision of the town. And personally, in looking at the MXD draft, there's a lot more opportunity to, potentially come up with a development that suits the small town feel, the small business feel, so on and so forth, without having to worry about, people worrying about having another Lowe's or another Walmart or something like that.
Let me ask you this, sir. Given the number of adjacent medium to larger parcels that are in this area, and the concern that many of our residents tonight have voiced with regard to development in general and the impact of development potentially on quality of life, would you be willing to consider graduated or sequential development of that area? Not all or nothing, but a phased kind of development, if that was a consideration?
Well, are you talking just this property or the whole, all the parcels that we happen to own?
Well, let's just talk just about that one in
Well,
terms of this
it goes back
request.
to the same discussions that the mayor was talking about, and the gentleman from Wildwood Park, you know, from a, you know, practical, financial perspective, a developer would probably never be able to just literally build that out, you know, one fell swoop. Now, we don't have any particular plans put in place because we don't know what the eventual master plan is going to show. But from what I know and talking to developers, typically what they'll want to do is a phased approach because, you know, they can build, say, the first section, whatever that may be. They start to get a return on the money that they put into that, and that gives them capital to then go to the next phase and the next phase. So, you know, that's the kind of thing that you would eventually work out in discussions with the planning commission when
All
you
right.
have a plan.
One other quick
to
question.
review.
You and your family also own the 25 or 30 acres on the other side, adjacent to
Yes, sir.
Center Street?
Yes.
Do you have a preference as to which of those parcels, if you had your druthers, would develop first?
We know the town is interested in Center Street.
Yes, sir.
But we know that in the CC zoning that's over there, we haven't yet been able to come to some consensus and agreement on what would be, you know, the right kind of development that would allow us to help you all in getting Center Street in, and then, you know, the particular developers that we've been working with to come up with some use that, you know, allows him to be profitable at the same time. So, you know, from my perspective, you know, this whole issue is trying to figure out a way that everybody, you know, comes up with something that they're really looking for. And
Right, good. Councilman Strong?
So the two questions I would ask Mr. Beck is, one, with the timeline for development, since, you know, people plan for the future, is this a 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 plus, just
it's
an
probably
option? in the
beyond my
future?
lifetime,
Okay. With that said also,
but I don't know. I mean, it
Understand.
depends on the developer.
I'm just trying to identify, is there a short term, you're kind of looking at it in the near future of, hey, in the next 5 years, I want to build something here, I already have a plan kind of starting to work, or it's I want to just have something in the future, reassurance I can do something with it? Because with and where I'm going with this, to be fair, is because we're working on the draft, as you said, for the new zoning.
Right.
And it might be a potential, instead of trying to get a CC now, which could be disapproved, work with Heather and staff to try and figure out something that's conducive while it's still in a draft stage.
Well, I was actually going to make a request that, you know, even though CC's been on the table, that you all actually give consideration to MXD.
And that's what I was gonna also say with the one across the street for Center Street, since you're saying that there may be not something in agreement, maybe it's something that needs to be reevaluated for those properties, a proposal, if you would, to do MXD for those instead of trying to do CC now. Just something to consider.
Well, I'll definitely take that in consideration if you would do the same on the R7 and MXD. And then, you know, we'll see what we can do working with Heather.
So we hear you saying that you are motivated and interested in pursuing those discussions.
Certainly.
All right. Yes, sir?
Sorry, I'd like to clarify what MXD is.
It's a proposed draft. It was introduced in draft form to the Planning Commission in August. There hasn't been any formal discussion just yet, but essentially, it's a mixed-use zone. The intent of it is to create more of like village-type development, not large-scale development, but with a residential component to it, maybe some pocket neighborhoods. Our pathways would connect. There's proposed a open space requirement, which is something that we don't see in our commercial zoning now, but there will be an open space requirement to make like little town centers. So almost to have like individual like little villages. So it wouldn't be a sea of parking and large buildings.
Less use than commercial.
And
It's more use than just residential.
It's a very flexible concept that
But
would
it's
allow
less
for integration.
But it's
residential
yeah.
than it would be
So I mean,
under
it
its
is
current
a,
zoning.
it is a,
A lot less.
yes,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
it's I think something that would be more desirable to the town to entertain
We-
than putting in
yeah.
big boxes or something like that.
We think it's
Or
worth
another
consideration as a possible additional arrow in the quiver in terms of,
And can I add just one
Yes,
more
sir.
thing, Chairman Butts, about it?
Yes.
And one of the best components of the proposed draft is that each parcel of property would actually undergo a sector plan or a master plan. So
Correct.
the developer would commit to a development, and it would have to be developed as such. And that would require buy-in from the surrounding community. And if that sector plan were to change, the surrounding community would have to be advised.
okay, understand, we're interested in this not because we're gung-ho development per se. We think the flexibility, the adaptability of it is something that is very, very worth considering and having it as a possible option. Councilman?
No.
No.
We haven't even formally discussed it. We're trying to work it through in a subcommittee.
Councilman?
If I understand the proposed sequence of events, and again, proposed sequence of events, this event would be akin to said MDX,
MXD?
MXD, that's right, I had to drive it here. MXD, the planning commission would be akin to the MXD. You might, in a sense, table this until MXD gets passed, and then you'd have one final meeting to.
Right.
That's
And I think that's what we were kind of saying. I mean, the motion on the table right now is to move it to commercial. I would request respectfully if we either pull that or we're going to say no and then approach you with MDX.
Well, I'd just say defer.
Okay.
Just leave it at defer.
Commission members, do you have a preference in terms of, ideally, our goal was to try to reach consensus to support or deny on every single one of these requests. How would
Yeah.
you feel about tabling one of these?
Mr. Beck,
We need to make sure that we're, he can withdraw,
I need
he
to
can
ask a
withdraw
procedural
it.
question.
but
That's,
we-
oh, I'm sorry, withdraw, he said
Yeah,
withdraw.
that's why I said if you withdraw it, then we.
Would
can
you
go
like
into
to
discussion.
withdraw
Can
it?
I ask a question first
Because-
before you get an answer from him?
Yes.
Is there, procedurally, is there an allowance for people to continue to come to us and ask for rezoning requests at this point, or are we done? So how
He-
far, I mean,
he
at
can
what
come
point
back.
do we cut off the rezoning requests?
I think the question is you want to make sure that, right, if you're going down this path, you want to make sure that Mr. Beck's legal rights are certainly protected.
Yes. Sure. Absolutely.
Well,
Tom?
it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about, what point in time are rezoning requests to this body.
For the purposes of a master plan?
Well, remember that the town council has to approve the master plan.
Correct,
So-
yes.
So
Do we
the
go all the way
ultimate
up to that point?
determination of what the master plan is going to say relative to perhaps even the property isn't decided until the town council makes a decision.
And that's
Now,
Understood, but if we feel like
That's
it
not
would make for a stronger proposal,
But that's not my
a
question.
stronger draft.
My question is, are all properties in the town Mount Airy currently, at any point between now and the time that this master plan goes to the council, allowed to come before this body for a request for rezoning? Or is there a time when zoning requests are no longer allowed to be submitted as part of this procedure?
not as a matter of law, it might be as a matter of procedure at its body.
Practically speaking, I mean,
You mean like once this master plan is done, sealed, council says, here it is. and
Well,
someone comes
that
in
is a different
and someone
question,
comes
because
in
I
and
do
pushes
want
that.
to caution that
That's not
once
what
the
I'm asking.
master plan's in place and
That's
you.
not what I'm asking.
I know what you're
No,
asking.
that's what I'm asking.
So,
I'm asking that.
But the answer is, there's not a legal deadline by which, that I'm aware of, by which the requests can no longer come. It might be a matter of procedure of this body, you might say, there's a deadline, but.
Well, that's I wanted to make sure that that's clear, so that we can allow it. I don't want to say, don't want us to say we can allow it and then turn around and say we can't.
I think
Understand what you're saying.
you would almost, again, maybe speaking out of turn, at this point, you would almost, perhaps the planning commission would, by consensus, postpone this particular decision.
Yeah,
Postpone this decision,
I
saying
think-
nothing else other than postponing. It's clear the public record reflects the intent of meeting in the middle for the
I think it'd be appropriate as a matter of process to, as with any motion, can table it.
Heather, I mean, preliminary discussion has already begun with
Yes.
one of our subcommittees on MXD.
Yes.
So I think the timing would work.
So I will ask one clarifier and then we can do it. Does it make more sense to table it now?
Yes,
Or
I
does it
would
make more
table it.
sense just to withdraw and have further
No,
discussion?
I would just table it.
Table it without
Can
further
I
more
follow
protection.
up with a question on those lines? With the other requests that we've denied, is there any reason why they can't come back with another proposal?
Again, I don't know of any legal deadline or any reason they can't, but at some point in time, I'd imagine that this body would want to say.
But a matter of practicality, we're going to push to complete the master plan draft and get into public forums and present it
I
to
think that
council.
we need to make a decision on a date so that people aren't
Right,
hanging out there
she's-
wondering.
She's asking for a deadline for this master plan update, which I totally understand of this is the last date anybody can submit something for this master plan.
How
not
about
anything in the future.
how about tomorrow?
We don't need to make that.
Driving towards this, if both sides are driving towards this consensus, which I, as a councilman, applaud.
Yeah.
Would encourage the commission to please, do this, right? If you set a hard date, well, you guys still have to come up with that legislation, and the council still has to approve it.
Mhm.
And this one seems fairly important. I would just recommend against a hard date, maybe a target date, because you want to make this happen.
Right, but respectfully, Chris, you also ended up asking for the master plan to be finished at some point, and this body's trying to get to that point. So somewhere we have to meet in between.
Right,
Not
but-
saying to Mr. Beck that we don't want to do this, we do. We
Right.
want to have this
Oh, yeah,
discussion
but this
fixed.
is new information, and
No, I
all of a
agree.
sudden, hey, this is what we
But I
wanted.
understand what Jen's asking.
Well, I think it's important for all the other properties in the town to know that
Yes.
they could still come to this board and ask for a rezoning request.
Well, and
That's
that-
what
and
I'm,
that's
that's
fair.
what I'm getting to.
They'll be coming to the town council. This is not the definitive decision.
That's right, I know.
These decisions will be going to the town council, so there is another avenue for those that don't like the decision that you got or the recommendation that you'll be making to the town council.
And even then,
Let me just weigh in on
And they're
that.
also going to public meeting before town council,
Just
another
as,
public meeting.
just as a reminder on that issue, I was asked for an opinion as to who had the final say, and it was my opinion that it's the town council. However, at the same time, we did, at the mayor's direction, submit that question to the Attorney General's office to provide an Attorney General's opinion. I have not, that was 2 years ago. I have not yet gotten one. I have promised one. Maybe it went to Mr. Dixon's friend. But I am promised one by the middle of this year. So, I just caution that I guess it's conceivable the AG's office could disagree with me. But I do know that
Let's do it.
the statute talks about this body providing recommendation.
Yeah, we still got two more.
So.
Here and here. All right. Chair would entertain a motion
I would like to make.
to table it.
I would like to make a motion to table this and have further discussions with Mr. Beck as we go forward with the MDX zoning and staff to try and see if we can come to a mutual
Yes.
agreement on the Beck properties.
I'll second it.
Motion has been made and seconded to table the current rezoning request on the Beck property. All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. It's unanimous. Mr. Beck, we sincerely appreciate your desire to expand the discussion. Thank you, sir.
302.
Okay, two left.
You said that the last time, Bill.
He missed one.
I know.
I was wrong.
What did we miss?
302 and 1010.
What's your
Okay.
pleasure?
Let's go
Pick your poison.
to 1010, shall we?
1010 and the last one will,
It's 302.
you're going to make the Hotmans wait the whole evening. The whole
I
evening.
enjoy them so much. I
Talk
know.
about cheap thrills.
This is for all the teasing.
Where else could you have this much fun?
For free.
1010 South Main.
1010 South Main Street, as we know, is the former Dennis Kitchen and Bath building. And the existing zoning is RE residential residential existing. And the requested zoning by the owner, Mr. Franco Melka, is CC Community Commercial.
He's a wonderful-
And at the July meeting, there was a consensus, a majority consensus to deny that request. So,
All right. Commission members, are you still of the opinion that you wish to deny this request?
Yes.
Or is there additional consideration or additional comment that you have at this time?
Now, one question before we say, is this does this fall into the guidelines that we have to have a formal response? Is that part of this or no? I know there was some window of a response back to the recipient for zoning.
no, they submitted this request as part of the master plan
Okay.
update.
So it doesn't apply.
Right.
Just want to make sure.
Yep, good question, but no, just part of the master plan process.
But there is additional consideration with regard to this property.
There's a different consideration of this
It's on a
property. that
different
has
track.
A timing response that I want to make sure this body was aware of.
All right. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to this property? Yes, ma'am. Is there anyone representing the owner? All right, yes, ma'am.
My
And you
name
are.
is, my name is Phyllis Freed. I live at 101 Fairwood Lane, and my property immediately joins the property in the back. So I am downhill from the property.
Have you been here all evening waiting to speak to
I
this?
have. I've been here for 8 years waiting for this, sir. And that's not kidding. Right, Mayor? Yes. I've lived here 10-plus years. I think I've fought for my property 8 of those years concerning this property. I have had many problems with the existing property, and it all is a result of a commercial property in a residential neighborhood. I guess when back in the olden days, it was okay to do that. There wasn't a lot of people here. But I can really relate to a lot of the residents who voiced their opinions tonight about concerns, because they're not only concerned about what's going to happen now, but when that property is sold and what happens, and that's exactly what happened with this property. It had a special exception. The exception ran out. They went bankrupt, I believe. It stood vacant for a number of years. You have Mr. Melka come in, he purchased the property. He's trying to do something with the property, but I, for one, do not want to see a commercial property in there. Some of the problems from the first commercial property still haunt the area. First and foremost, I discovered that the stormwater drainage came right from the middle of my backyard. That has not been fixed to this day. So that's been at least 10 years that I've been in there.
Has the owner broached that subject with you? Has he offered remediation?
They offered to do nothing.
Okay.
Like I said, I've been fighting for 8 of the 10 years, if not longer, that I've been in here to try to have this resolved. I have put several Band-Aids on it, but it's not fixed. It has not been, it's not been addressed.
Right.
Recently, just
Okay.
probably within 6 months of this date, I was told that there is soil contamination at the property. I was also told that there is asbestos in the existing buildings. These are real things.
Well, these are points that have been raised in the past.
They are
And
real,
were part
real,
of
but
our
I didn't
previous
know them
consideration.
until probably 6 months ago.
Okay.
And I bet a lot of the area residents don't know this. So my concerns are, Mr. Melka is trying to improve the property, he's trying to do commercial business out of there. There shouldn't be any construction on there due to the asbestos. There are real problems that need to be addressed, and first and foremost, I would like to see the problems with the past commercial property be addressed before anything is considered for this property
All right.
in the future.
Okay, all right, thank you
Okay?
very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Any other comments from anyone? All right. I ask again, are you still of the opinion to deny this request?
Yes.
Same is true? All right. We remain in agreement on that.
And was that a?
It's no longer a majority, just
It's a
consensus to
unanimous.
deny.
Consensus to deny.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Folletta. You were reading my mind.
So that brings us to,
Good night, Heather.
finally, 302 Watersville Road.
We'll talk about it next week.
Weren't we supposed to end at 10? Is that okay?
No.
10:14.
We're having too much fun. We're going to push through this.
Oh, and you know what? Further showing you the love, I don't know
photo?
that this was.
Wow, man.
That was rude. Can you Google
Not a
that?
problem.
She brought a thumb
She's
drive.
got it.
Did you? Can I borrow that? Because I even had, Trudy, I swear, that was, wow.
Is there anyone here tonight
About anything
who
else?
wanted to make a comment with regard to this request and this property?
No?
No?
That's easy.
I'll talk.
Who wants to frame this for us? Heather?
I would love to.
All right, go for it.
This property is actually on the corner of Watersville Road and 27. It's across the street from Dr. Burkett's dentist office. It backs up to Watkins Park, and it is
Walk by it every morning.
abutted by the entrance to our new Cars Ridge Elementary School. There was a mulch processing. The Browns, mulch processing, historically, mulch sale, there we go. The property is zoned R3, medium density residential, and there is an existing building on there, Mr. Hoffman, and is that just an office, or?
It's a rental house.
Okay, a rental house. And Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman have requested, zoning for, community commercial. And Bill, do you want to get up and kind of reiterate, your business plan for that property?
We talked last night. My name is Bill Hopman. My wife Trudy and I own the property at 302 Watersville Road. We've been residents for about 30 years, run two businesses in town, Hopman Builders and Mount Airy Daycare Center.
Across from the dentist.
As you know, we're trying to expand the daycare center, move to this property. We'd like to expand it from its current 86 students to 180. The only zoning right now that would allow us to do this is community commercial. We're limited in any other zoning designation to 5,000 square feet. So in order to expand, we run our daycare now out of a 5,000 square foot building. The only way to make this feasible, if we did move this and expand the building, is to also incorporate some professional space and stores and the like, if we could. That was our thought. We know that this is, I believe this is a great spot for community commercial. There may be objections to that. I think it would work fine. But our vision is to have this flow into the park, be a part of the park. We have the daycare center there operating next to the elementary school in Cars Ridge. It would flow perfectly. And then have shops that would, maybe ice cream shops, delis, whatever you might have, that would lead to the park. People could walk up from the park. Maybe we could actually do some extra parking for the park fields and so forth in that area. And I just think we could make this a beautiful property that would flow and be, a complement to the park and the community. Now, we've talked about the MXD designation, and that's kind of what I see. I'd love to go community commercial, and I think it fits perfectly, I really do. But our vision is more of a historical-looking residential look that would complement the park in that area. So,
All right, so let me understand. Number one, you would like to be able to expand the square footage of the daycare center operation.
Right.
From what you have now.
Right.
Okay. In terms of perhaps the construction cost or return on the investment required, you need to hedge your bets in that regard, so you may need more than the revenue that would be generated by that operation.
Exactly.
In order to make this
It would
play.
not work, right.
So there's a square footage there's a utilization concern, okay?
Right.
This is the piece of property that you have for consideration. So we've got to look at what you want to do and the space parameters and so forth and concerns, as well as that particular location and the utilization of this type,
Right.
okay?
Mhm.
All right.
You know, I think we haven't addressed the MXD. That's something that we had talked about previously at the other meeting. It's not been implemented yet, so we're here asking for community commercial because that's what works for us right now. And I actually think that would work perfectly on that corner, but
All right, commission members, what do you like about this and what concerns do you have about this?
So, right off the bat, comment I'd make is I understand it's on a corner, you think commercial would be great there. Concerns I have, I mean, you've got townhouses right across the street, not to mention you're parked right next between two schools, and you're backed up by the dog park. So I don't think it would be, in my opinion, a good thing to put community commercial when you're talking about you want to put shops, expand the square footage, et cetera, on that piece of property being so close to a school zone. Not to mention all the other logistical issues you would have to take into consideration between traffic, the intersections, infrastructure, et cetera. I mean, that's just my off-the-cuff remark of trying to put something there now. MXD, I don't know what falls into that yet and what it could entail and what that would mean for your future property uses, what you want to do business-wise. But that's my observation real quick at looking at it.
well, to that point, the townhouses are not adjacent. They're up the street. Adjacent, across the street is the dental center. You have the apartment buildings across the street, which are three-story buildings across the street. Then you have a buffer with the new Pars Ridge Road, which I don't know the name of actually, but that road, and now you actually have a larger buffer because the school has moved up the street, so the new middle school.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the aerial footage of what you have right now and just that whole property, if you zoned it community commercial. I mean, essentially, not that you would, but you could make that whole property up to the setbacks, which Heather can quote them off, but I'm sure it's like 50 feet or something like that.
Or
35,
less.
50 feet, or less, based on that. So anybody even after you could come in and drop a big box there, right on the corner. And
It's
that's
only
something we have to look
2.5
at.
acres. I don't think it would accommodate that much. But there's an easement on, there's a state road
They
easement.
could drop a medium box, but
There's a
then
state road
parking
easement
and
on the
anything
front,
else.
right.
I mean, it's just considerations.
What I recall from when you were last here is that we had the same or similar discussion, and then you guys were going to meet with staff and figure something else out that wasn't community
wouldn't meet
commercial?
That is, and that's why you're last and you didn't have any pictures. And, no, we did meet. When I learned that 20,000 square feet of retail was really the number that they needed to look at to make that property viable, I did start to craft more of like a neighborhood business type of zoning. And I had a conversation with you, Bill,
Right.
and it was seemingly, it was coinciding with the mixed-use concept. It was to create another zone for that.
Right, which make no
it-
sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in addition to mixed
Yeah.
use,
I
right?
mean, I think there was, based on conversations we had, there is a recognition that community commercial, especially given the proximity to the schools,
Right.
could be concerning.
Yeah.
And they, especially in their business, I mean, children's safety is their first priority.
Right, right.
So while they would, have a quality development, they do understand the concern of putting CC on that parcel of ground because anyone could own it.
Right.
So that being said, we did not come up with another zoning.
Heather, could MXD accommodate, at least at this point, the consideration for a combination of a daycare center and some commercial?
It could.
It could.
The
All right,
only,
but the concern I have is that over time, could that combination of utilization morph and become more and more commercial and less daycare center? Until at some point, either during your ownership or later on, it becomes almost a pure community commercial utilization right there adjacent to
Well,
what exists.
I understand your point, but I don't think that's a bad thing. That I understand the daycare is what we want there. And I understand your concern that if we left or sold, that it could change. But I actually think if you control the MXD designation properly, that this could be a beautiful thing there. I don't think that's a problem.
And it potentially could be a beautiful thing, but we also don't want to craft the MXD in such a way that it meets just your one property right this second. We're trying to make a robust vehicle.
Right.
And so taking that into consideration, you know, we have to weigh everything. And
But
I'm not
isn't-
saying it's against
Yeah,
it, but
right.
I'm just saying as it's being
This-
crafted, it's something to take into
This
consideration.
is sounding almost like perhaps this should be tabled as well. It-
Right,
it
well, I
deserves
kinda figured
further
that's where we're
Not
consideration.
just to fit it into a CC.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
I'm fine if you're fine with the tabling.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I figured
Discuss it further.
I'd throw it all out there first.
Well,
No, that's good.
it just sounds like it needs more consideration and more discussion with town staff.
Yeah, this is,
And we need to get further down the road in our own understanding of what we want to accomplish with MXD.
Right.
Okay? Could I entertain a motion to this effect?
To table it until
Yes.
a further, I will make the motion to table this for further discussion.
Is there a
Can I
second?
add one more thing before we
Yes, sir.
motion that? There's one other option that there could be out there, and that would be limited commercial.
So are you asking for zoning for limited commercial
Well,
instead of CC right now?
The problem is
I would
don't
just say
have a-
because it hasn't been, I don't know if it goes into a legality that we have to actually put out zoning of LC and all that, and we can't even talk about it right now.
he can put in a
I don't
different
see how you can
request,
do
or,
part school, part.
Well, that was my
limited
understanding, that we
commercial.
could actually downgrade from the.
You can't.
it's a
But-
maximum of
can't.
5,000
But
square
if
feet.
I
if
understand.
he's asking for limited commercial and that's what he wants, then.
Well,
then
what
you
the
go
point I
through
want to bring
respond
up
to
is.
I don't know that you want to go there because
No,
our
I
response is
understand.
going to be different.
No, I understand. But
It's your choice. We're
But
just,
my point here is that, and I think MXD is going to work, and I think we may end up coming to an understanding, but, and I don't know if limited commercial would end up getting passed or not, but I'm now cutting myself off from limited commercial possibility.
That's only for this consideration.
right now, your consideration is CC. If you're tabling it, then it's just tabled for further discussion for you to work out other
That's
issues.
fine.
You
And
could
if the
withdraw
MXD
it,
doesn't
you
work-
can do whatever.
And that leaves your options and
It's
our
a
options.
pause.
Understood.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so let's get back to the motion that's been
So
proposed.
I made the motion that this will be tabled for further discussion. Believe Mr. Folletta.
I did second it.
Seconded.
Yes. All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, like sign? All right.
Oh,
I
you
think
tried
that's a
the rest of
win-win. I think that's a win-win. So we got two tables. I hope you feel like that's a win-win. You have, it definitely is.
Do it over there.
Okay.
Heather wants to wrap up the rest of it.
All right, let's wrap it up. Let's go.
It'll be useful for you.
Next on the agenda.
That brings us to MXD draft zoning update. Heather?
Draft water ordinance recommendation.
Draft
Skip
Oh,
that.
draft water. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Wait a minute, Tom.
Are we gonna do that in the next 4 minutes?
Well, Heather says she wants to finish this. I know, Heather said she wanted to finish it. It's his call.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Well,
I'm dead.
I hope,
I'm out of here at 10:30.
we got it.
Yes, we do, and we have the benefit of our attorney here.
Tom's been here all
Yes,
this
sir.
time just for this.
Yes. Could we ask you to keep it down, please? We're still trying to finish this up.
So there's a sign for rezoning on the corner of Century Drive and Backacre Circle.
Mhm.
Has that been discussed at all tonight?
Backacre Circle was that little small strip
That
going
was
from an
done
R2 to industrial.
That's it.
That sign's nowhere near there, so I thought that there might have been something else happening.
No.
No.
Okay.
In order to put that sign where it's going, no one,
No one would ever
like,
see it.
it's like, we try to get it in the.
So yes, it's been discussed and it was for that little strip.
Make sure nothing else going on.
And
Okay, I got it right here. Got it right.
Heather, my neighbors kept asking me about what was going to be built in Wildwood Park.
I know, and I do want
Everybody
to
asked
state
me
for the
that one, too.
record that
Yeah.
Wildwood Park is not going anywhere.
I had Dick Swanson
There
ask me.
was a logistical issue. Wildwood Park is remaining the beautiful passive park that it is.
Awesome.
We apologize for any alarm.
All right,
Everyone's been asking that one.
okay.
We're gonna go through this whole.
Mr. McCarron?
No, please.
This is the water allocation, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
30 seconds.
The major revisions I'll point out and highlight. Page 4 of 25, you'll see the schematic for the
I got them right.
site plan process. And you'll see right in the middle what I thought had been requested, that we have the concept site plan and allocation permit application submission,
Okay.
plus then the approval or review at least.
Yeah.
To then be followed by the site plan, final site plan submittal. This was in keeping, I think, with some of the comments before, and hopefully section 98-30, which follows on page 5 of 25 into page 6, and also the companion sections relative to subdivision plan and minor subdivision plans that follow, more or less follow that pattern. I think there was a desire for greater clarity on two fronts. One, that water and sewer a clearer statement that water and sewer allocation permit applications would be made and submitted at the concept plan submittal timeframe would be considered with the concept plan. So hopefully this better delineates that, or more explicitly does so. So that's those changes. The next one that I would want to point out would be,
How about section F? There's some new language there, wasn't there?
where is that now?
Was that
In-
section F? We were gonna.
6?
About page
Where is
number.
F?
Page 6.
F is page 6.
It was.
Well, it's just there's movement, because we're fitting into a concept plan, and if you look back at the schematic on page 4 of 25, the sequence is going to be, as I understand it, pre-submittal conference on day 1, then between days 1 and 60, two things are kind of happening simultaneously. One is the forest stand delineation submittal and approval. And then number 2, a concept plan and allocation permit application is submitted. So as a result, on page 6, I simply move the forest conservation ordinance up to subsection B on page 5 of 25 to maintain that sequence, to then be followed by the concept plan submission, water and sewer allocation permit application submission, and then followed by the concept plan review, approval, along with the permits, the allocation permits. Let's see, page, for instance, 8 of 25, subsection I think there was a desire to move or to make clear that the building permit application phase follows the final site plan approval phase, and that's why that has moved. Page 9 of 25 at the bottom, I'm simply trying to do the same thing relative to the subdivision plan. It has a separate section on concept plan review and approval. You can see the new language down at the bottom into page 10 of 25. Basically, in subsection G, on page 10 of 25, I make clear that, that the Planning Commission in the same meeting is to deal with, approve, disapprove, whatever, water and sewer allocation permit applications at the same time at the concept plan phase. And then section 98-41, you'll see on page 11 of 25, essentially the same changes to that. Do want to call your attention to page 13 of 25. We've got some additional definitions that have come about as a result of some suggestions in our discussions last time. First of all, I did add a definition for allocation year, because using that term makes it easier to talk about circumstances under which the Planning Commission might wish to readjust or allocation, I should say, between the years in which, now that we're going to every 2 years, between the years, in the 2 years, between when basically the available capacity yield's decided and allocation and priority areas are decided. So that's one addition. There was also a desire, according to my notes, that we add definitions for commercial, for industrial, and what we mean by residential. You'll see those definitions in there. They are largely lifted, as had been suggested by Councilman King, from the sanitation section, which I found to be good, solid definitions, and pretty reasonable and acceptable. Emergency claims, still on page 13 of 25. This would be definition 8 now. There had been a desire expressed that we make those emergency claims for failed wells or septic systems within town limits for residential existing lots of record in order to limit that. So that was also an addition.
Tom, to clarify, that is only going to happen in emergency claim. That is not something that this body or town council or anybody, that actually has to come from MDE to say, you have to do this.
Not necessarily.
That's according to this wording, says that only they can, it has to be ordered by the Maryland Department of Environment.
And shall include allocations for extension of water and sewer service
Right.
ordered by the MDE. So,
and is the,
well, it's to include. In other words, you can have somebody come to the town council and say, I've got a failed well, septic in town, I would like to connect, without a 9222 order from the MDE, and the town council
I
could
just want to be
approve
sure
it.
it wasn't, we had to have MDE.
Yeah, so, at any rate, there's some restrictive language there to make it clear this is to be within town and for residential purposes.
Good.
Another new definition I found desirable, at least, is on page 14 of 25. It's number 10. And I simply called it expansion of existing commercial or industrial use. And let me try what I'm getting at here. There were two areas of concern that the prior draft really did not take account for. One was you have an existing commercial or industrial business wishes to expand without necessarily a redevelopment or revitalization, just expands their business. As a result, they want to, they are going to increase their water usage. You know, as a town, we may well want to see businesses grow that way. And so what I thought might be, and there's two ways of handling this, is to have an allocation category called expansion of existing commercial industrial use. Now, let me caution, and I think we get at this later, that circumstance does not require a new site plan, does not require a new concept plan, does not require, as I've drafted it, even an application for new water and or sewer permits. Typically, they've just been allowed to grow. We sort of account for these things in the front end in determining whether or not we're going to approve it. But as this body may want to move forward in the future, you may still want to allocate something, hold back some, as I've drafted at the recommendation of the town engineer, to account for that kind of anticipated growth. The other way you could handle that is to simply, in the front end, when the town engineer computes and makes recommendations on what the available capacity yield should be to the town council, he could just simply account for that in his calculation, just as we call for him to do with respect to pipeline development, just as we do with system capacity limitations and things of that sort. You could handle it that way as well. The way it's currently drafted, it actually calls for this body to set aside an allocation for that, as the town engineer might recommend. So there's one of two ways. And if you're going to do it the way this is drafted and contemplates doing it, you probably need a new definition. So that's the purpose of definition number 10. Another, I would say, significant revision, although I'm not sure it's a change, necessarily a change in concept. Under new demand, you'll see that I've broken out what new demand could mean. It could mean any proposed new commercial, industrial, residential development an existing or newly annexed property with existing buildings but who need water, not currently serviced. The concept of redevelopment and revitalization, and you'll see that I have developed a definition for that separately. And those would typically have to go through a site plan process, and those would require, I think, or should require a water and sewer permit application process. And then lastly, what I've just talked about, the expansion of existing commercial or industrial use. And as you'll see down below, where I say "and for which" in the case of subsections 12A through C, meaning A through C requires water sewer permits, and in some cases probably requires a site plan process, maybe in all those cases, well, in 2 of those cases. I purposefully, obviously, leave out the notion of expansion of existing commercial industrial use, because that would not be a circumstance typically where we would require new permits, new site plan or concept plan process to occur. On page 15 of 25, you'll see the added definition under definition number 21 of redevelopment and revitalization. Shall mean projects within the town that seek to renovate, restore, rebuild, or revive an existing building or structure. And then this last part gets at one of Scott's comments about the issue of nonconforming uses. This would be the area where you would have a nonconforming use that sought to be revived. You know, that's probably redevelopment or revitalization. That would typically require, would require a site plan, and thus I would say should require, if there's been a non-conforming use that has expired, should require application as well for water and sewer allocation.
21.
Definition 21, page 15. So those are the major definitional changes. You turn to page 17 of 25. Particularly subsection B, where we indicate beginning on January 15, 2014, and every 2 years thereafter. Again, the prior draft had this occurring annually. It was felt that that's too much to do annually. So let's go to every 2 years, and that's what this gets at. Right now, the way this is drafted, it's contemplated, this entire ordinance would be contemplated to take effect January 1st, 2014. January 15, 2014 seems a reasonable time for the town engineer to come up with his initial report to the town council about what he recommends is available in terms of capacity to be allocated. Now, continuing with that, the way I've laid this out gets at another issue, a comment that Dick Swanson made, and I thought was a very good one. And that is, you could well have a recommendation by the town engineer, or a report from the town engineer that says this is the available, what I'm calling available capacity yield. That is, what's available to be allocated. But the town council might say, I know what is all that's available, but we might not want to allocate all of this at one time. This gets at the 2020 proposal, right? So the way I've set subsection B up here under section 109.2, this is page 17 of 25, is you have kind of a dual sequence. You have town engineer comes up with a report to the town council and says, this is what I might recommend to be the available capacity yield. This is really the most that should be allocated. Town council then either approves that or modifies it in some way, maybe lessens it, and says, okay, we as the town council determine this is what's available to be allocated. Then from there, the town engineer would prepare a report for this body's regular February meeting, which occurs at the end of February. Hopefully that'll be enough time, whereby the town engineer can say, okay, now that I know, now that the town council determine what that available capacity yield is going to be, here's what I recommend as a town engineer as to how we ought to allocate this stuff. That report and the town council's resolution would then be transmitted here to this body, at which time this body sort of takes over the process of allocating, which now occurs, if you turn to page 19 of 25, under the very next section. And what subsection, down at the bottom, subsections A and B contemplate are two things. A, obviously, talks about at its regularly scheduled meeting in March. Why March, if you're getting the report by February? Because there had been a desire expressed that we have a public hearing with due notice and all of that. So you will need to have town engineer's recommendation by the February meeting in order to properly notice a public hearing, probably before your March meeting, maybe literally right before, the hour before your March meeting. That is subsection A. That's when you would hold a public hearing, and then you might make a determination. You might tweak what the town engineer recommends. You might accept it, whatever. But that's when you would do in your March meeting every 2 years, the allocating among the allocation categories. Subsection B gets at the development of priority areas, which is one of the areas, one of the allocation categories. Unless somebody gives, advises that this is not practical, there's no reason that you all can't in January be doing that in anticipation, I think, of the February report that you'd approve or modify in March. So while the town council's taking up what the available capacity yield is in January, let's say, or even February, the 1st of February, let's say, you all, I think, probably at the end of January can be in a position to say, okay, this is our priority areas map, and after the first time, it'd probably be mostly adjustment rather than a creation out of whole cloth that a new priorities
We also
area.
said that from time to time, from 2-year to 2-year, whatever, we might feel that the prioritization needed to shift.
Yes,
Or
and-
depending upon what the allocation capacity was or whatever, but at least we felt that flexibility was needed.
Yeah, and if you go on page 20 of 25, we get to that flexibility. Now, again, on page 20 of 25, up at the top, we have a list of allocation categories. There had been some concern about making sure that the ordinance is clear that some of these categories might, in a given period, be zero. And the way I've tried to get at that is if you look up at the top, the very first line, that the allocation of available yield to new demand shall be divided among all or some of the following allocation categories, to try and make clear that some of these may not be used in a given 2-year period or even more. I've also, down at the bottom, added 2 categories as we discussed. Under 10, redevelopment and revitalization. Number 12, expansion of existing commercial or industrial use. Then to what Bill was just talking about under subsection D, a little bit of revamping there to give the Planning Commission some flexibility. Adjustments between allocation years, and that's why we needed a new definition there. Under subsection 1, as the Planning Commission deems necessary or appropriate in order to reflect significant changes in market demand, development activity or inactivity, and/or the needs of the community. Now, query whether or not you all might want to add a provision there to require a 2/3 vote as opposed to a simple majority. It's just a thought. Meaning that if you want to have something that can occur without a frequency restriction, maybe you want to make it a supermajority to approve. That might be a balance, just a thought. And then under subsection 2 is a separate category of adjustment that you might make for underutilized allocation category, which is a defined term. And that would come with some limitations, the same limitations as existed in the prior draft. I think that way you'd have 2 means by which you could make changes, or 2 circumstances under which that might occur. In turning to page 21 of 25, subsection A just captures, again, that this ordinance, at least as currently drafted, might become effective January 1st, 2014. And I think we needed a more explicit statement as to when water and sewer permits are required. And they're basically required anytime there's going to be any kind of new development or new service to an existing building. I make clear here that expansion of, simple expansion due to, of commercial, existing commercial or industrial use does not require anybody to go through the permitting process again. But again, it ought to probably be accounted for in some kind of way, either by this body or in the front end by the town engineer. Under subsection B, there had been some discussion about an administrative fee, and I just chose $25, I don't know, but that perhaps we don't charge it where a water allocation permit is submitted with a concept plan. Remembering that, you know, if you're dealing with an existing property, not going through a concept plan, but they need water because of whatever reason, their wells have failed or whatever. You know, they should probably pay a processing fee, but the discussion I thought was that those who are paid, what is it, $1,500, I think, already with the concept plan ought to not be charged $25 on top of that. So that's kind of how this, as currently drafted, addresses or gets at that fee or how it's to be
I'm
charged.
just touching on that fee real quick. There's one section in here coming up where you talk about somebody having to reapply for a water permit again if it's denied. And I apologize, I know it's coming up in the pages, but that fee, I think there needs to be something in there. If somebody paid the fee once and it's denied and they have to reapply, they don't need to pay the fee again.
That's not necessarily true, because remember that the fee gets to the administrative charge for staff time. And if it's applied for once, then the administrative cost, if you will, has been incurred. They reapply, it's going to be incurred again. So I see where you're going, and maybe that's certainly up to you guys.
If it is $25.
If it's $25,
Yeah.
it's token.
The biggest change on, maybe out of all of this, is page 22 of 25 down at the bottom. And the language here, admittedly, is probably going to need some tweaking here. But basically, it introduces the concept of a waiting list. What we've said is that in order to obtain a water and sewer permit, there are a number of things that the owner or developer is going to have to establish to this body's satisfaction by what I call a preponderance of the evidence. More likely than not is what it is. And there are a number of things that the owner is unable to establish a new water source within the boundaries of the project, you know, that we're not in a moratorium and things of that sort. But the waiting list contemplates, and this is from comments that I received the last couple times we've met, contemplates the situation where somebody is denied solely because, you know, there's not enough at the present time available capacity yield to supply completely to this project. And there had been some desire to create a waiting list or a set of waiting lists maybe for each allocation category, as the case may be. Anyway, that